Good morning, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'm Sarah Hulak. I'm one of the attorneys here at the Nebraska Department of Education, and I'll be serving as your hearing officer today. We're here today for the proposed Chapter 4 regulations to textbook loans to children enrolled in private schools in Nebraska. Today is Friday, July 22nd, 2016 at 10 a.m. We are at the State Board Meeting Room at the Nebraska Department of Education at 301 Centennial Mall South, 6th floor, Lincoln, Nebraska. The legal notice of this hearing was published in the Omaha World Herald on June 18th of 2016. We have some guidelines for testimony today. First of all, a Nebraska Department of Education staff member and Director of Finance and Organizational Services, Bryce Wilson, will describe and explain the proposed rule. This will be followed by testimony by interested persons. Each person presenting written or oral testimony is requested to introduce yourself, state a concise suggestion or recommendation of what action you would like the board to take, state the rationale or reasons for your recommendation. You may reinforce, but please refrain from repeating previous testimony. Each person testifying will be limited to 5 minutes. If additional time is needed, it'll depend on our timing today. At the conclusion of all testimony from interested persons, Bryce will have the opportunity to respond to the testimony presented today. And then that will conclude all the testimony. The testimony presented is being recorded, and the audio will be made available to the State Board of Education at the time the State Board considers the adoption of the rule. All written testimony must be submitted to me prior to 5 p.m. today in order to be part of the record. Bryce will provide the description and explanation of the proposed rule.
Good morning. The rule hearing today is a result of work done by NDE in conjunction with the Nebraska Catholic Conference. The proposed rule changes include broadening the definition of textbook to include electronic subscriptions and other material that the school district has a subscription or license agreement for. The definition of loan is also being added to the proposed rule, and those are the main changes in the rule. So that's what we have for an opening.
Good morning. My name is Greg Logsdon. I'm the superintendent of schools for the Diocese of Grand Island Catholic Schools, and I am here today in support of the proposed changes. These comments about the hearing draft of proposed revision of Rule 4 are being submitted by the diocesan superintendents of the Catholic schools in the state of Nebraska on behalf of the parents and students of the schools sponsored and operated by the Archdiocese of Omaha and the Diocese of Lincoln and Grand Island. In aggregate, these three systems constitute the largest segment of non-government pre-K-12 education in Nebraska, with nearly 25,000 students in 115 approved or accredited elementary and secondary schools. The diocesan superintendents of the Catholic schools are pleased to be in support of the proposed revisions presented in this hearing draft. The revision, update, and improved Rule 4, making it more contemporary, more relevant, and more functional, resulting in educational benefits for the students. The revised definition of textbook is especially significant and important because it helps to broaden and keep up with the evolving forms of instructional materials. It becomes inclusive of a broader array of modern textbooks, not only the traditional hardbound versions, but also electronic digital tools and license-based work texts that accommodate interactive learning. With these revisions, the funds appropriated by the legislature will be expended wisely and responsibly. The recipient students will be the beneficiaries of a reasonable, realistic policy, one that is within the scope of the authorized statute and possible in all respects as confirmed by the Attorney General's courtesy review. The diocesan superintendents of the Catholic schools also use this means to express their appreciation to Commissioner Bloomstadt, and the members of the State Board of Education for acknowledging the deficiencies and limitations of the current Rule 4 and for being willing to maintain communications on the issues and work for solutions. Now it is important that the process move forward to full promulgation and implementation. The Catholic school communities look forward to the results and will continue to cooperate and monitor promptly that progress. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dr. J.D. Miller, and I'm the Director of Curriculum and Professional Development in Lincoln Public Schools. In addition to overseeing the curriculum adoptions and implementations in K-12 programs within LPS, another of my responsibilities is to collaborate with non-public schools within our district boundaries on both the Title II-A Professional Development Program and the Rule 4 Textbook Loan Program. Based on the recent digital curriculum adoptions by Lincoln Public Schools, I believe that I have a unique perspective on the changes proposed within Rule 4. We have found that more and more curriculum resources are available digitally at both the elementary and the secondary levels. However, there is great variation in how publishers define a digital resource. In a recent RFP for middle-level math curriculum, we requested proposals for only completely digital curriculum and received proposals for everything from curriculum that involved individual digital subscriptions with high degrees of individualization options to a simple PDF of a textbook that was nearly 10 years old. Many content areas will offer only supplemental materials in a digital format, while the textbook remains as a traditional hardbound book. Others will offer a digital version of the textbook, but any supplementary materials are available for an additional cost. Some publishers offer a number of subscriptions for a given school year, and if a student leaves the district or a course, that subscription cannot be accessed by another student for the remainder of the year. Other publishers offer a set number of subscriptions that can be used at any time, and the students who access the subscriptions can change throughout the course of the school year. There are also tremendous variations related to the digital subscriptions assigned to students. Digital subscriptions may range from everything from 1 year to 7 years, depending on the publisher or provider. There are also variations in how they are assigned and managed. One of the largest digital subscriptions that Lincoln Public Schools has purchased in the past several years was to supplement our literacy adoption in grades K-5 a few years ago. While we did not have all of the digital devices to utilize those resources in the initial years, we have added those devices and continue to utilize more and more of the digital resources. All student reading and student work in this particular text must be assigned to students through a teacher's subscription. It cannot be managed by an individual student. This will be very difficult given both the current and revised versions of Rule 4, since the purchase of teacher editions are forbidden. Each school represents a separate site within that subscription system. When students change teachers or schools, those changes must be managed at the district level. When something as simple as a teacher name change occurs, that requires a district-level system administrator to make that change. There are other variations related to authentications of student accounts and the purging of the previous year's accounts to prepare for the assignment of students for a new school year. We are uncertain how certain similar changes and procedures will be managed and whether that can occur at the non-public school or whether only Lincoln Public Schools can make those changes. And there are variations with all of the different publishers that are out there. While we believe that all of these resources have value for our students, there are certainly challenges with implementing these different systems within one school district. There will be many, many more challenges when we consider the differing data systems, protocols, and capacities of non-public school districts that we serve. We continue to build capacities and systems to manage these issues within our own school district. 2 years ago, we ordered more than 2,500 textbooks for non-public schools through Rule 4, and last year was nearly 1,000 textbooks. I want to convey that I value the partnerships that we have with our non-public school colleagues and believe in providing support that benefit all students within the state of Nebraska. If we are to include digital subscriptions, textbooks, and resources, that represents a much more complex process than the current system and will require school districts, both public and non-public, to implement extensive new systems and procedures to fully implement these changes. I respectfully request that the State Board gather more information from public school districts, non-public school districts, and publishers before finalizing the language of Rule 4. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jim Cunningham. I'm the interim executive director of the Nebraska Catholic Conference. For many years, in fact, decades prior to retiring last year, I was the executive director of the conference, and I've had extensive experience with the textbook loan program all the way back to when it started. I just want to respond briefly to the previous testimony, understanding that this area involves challenges. There are challenges that are precipitated by the rapidly evolving nature of instructional materials. Just a couple of comments, though. It is the public school district. Well, let me go back first. I think that there is an acknowledgement that there will be a need for guidance from the department on certain questions that may come up, such as those that have been presented today. The way that the mechanism works, the school district does establish the list of available materials that the parents can request to borrow. So there is some discretion there as to implementation at local level, and there are also provisions for local level policies, and so I'm sure that there are, in the cooperative spirit of the public and private schools, there are ways to address most, if not all, of the challenges together with the guidance that can come from the State from the State Department of Education. Our concern is that if the process is elongated, and it's been going on for a year, this goes all the way back to July of 2015 and even perhaps earlier than that, but if the process is elongated and extended too much more of a period, then we will be up against the deadline for the start of the next cycle of textbook loans. And we would really appreciate it if these reasonable changes could be made in time to affect the cycle that starts in November of this year. So that is a concern that I want to put on the record about whether or not a great deal more process is undertaken to try to clarify the issues. The guidance can occur over the period of time, and to delay any longer would just mean that students would have restricted access to the materials that otherwise are under consideration for this purpose. So that's a concern I want to put on the record. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Dee Turk. I'm at Educational Service Unit Number 2 in Fremont. I was here at the last hearing. Truly appreciate the work that's been put into this draft as opposed to the previous draft. Much more detailed, and I think it does clarify many of the questions. I don't think it clarifies all of the questions. And specifically, I would draw attention to page 2 at the top regarding web-based online materials. It specifically outlines that as a subscription or a license agreement entered into with the school district. One of the things the Department of Education is going to need to address is the impact on third-party organizations, be that a post-secondary institution, educational service unit, school foundation. You're going to run into some of those issues, and I think that's a question that definitely needs to be addressed prior to November. With November being that deadline, I would agree with that, trying to get this clarified by that time. But the purpose of the rules is to answer the questions for everyone, so there's not a lot of calls to the NDE, and I think that's one of the ones you're going to come up with.
Anyone else? Okay, with that, I will conclude the hearing.